So other members, if they can't make it, they'll be able to watch this video. All right, so our recording has started. All right, so good morning, students of New Testament, our New Testament scholars. I hope you are enjoying yourselves this morning. We're so thankful to see you yet again. I'm going to share my screen and let's go to our course. Let's do a little backtrack. Can you believe it? Week 4, we're in week 4. And let me double back before we come forward. I am catching up with grading. So today I'll be coming through and grading your discussion for week 2 and week 3. Remember, we had to get caught up because of spring break. And so I will be grading those assignments today and tomorrow. So I also want to remind you, let me see, to go to those people who are watching. If you can't join us on Wednesdays, always come to your announcement tab. I like to put your weekly announcements there. So just a reminder of what you need to read or what you need to do for that week. I also put our link to the videos. When we do our I can't talk. When we have our class sessions, I will post your videos there. Okay. And also just wanted to remind you of registration is open for the summer. We have a pastoral ministry course. And also for the fall, we have Intro to Religious Studies and Old Testament and Hebrew Literature. Okay. All right, so let me go back one more time and come back and see who has joined. All right, good morning, Gloria.
Good morning.
All right, let's go back to our lesson for today. Before I go to our lesson, let's see what we remember from the last couple of weeks. We have been talking about synoptic gospels, and I know it's been a lot. So we had Matthew, we did Mark. Today we're going to talk about Luke, okay? But so far we've talked about Matthew and Mark. So just as a review, somebody just tell me, what is the synoptic problem? What's the synoptic problem?
There are many points where all three of those gospels agree, but there are also many differences because each of the writers inserted something or emphasized something differently.
Correct. Thank you, Walter. And what are the synoptic gospels? Somebody want to tell me?
Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Very good. So if you're telling a friend, they say, well, John is a gospel, why didn't you include John? What are we going to say?
They don't line up with the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it does not include the same thing. The other three had similarities to the birth of Christ and things like that. John has a different focus.
All right, very good. I like where you said John has a different focus, and then when we get to John next week, we will understand the reason why. Now, another thing I want to highlight for you. So we talked about the synoptic gospels. Remember, that means synoptic, seeing with one eye. We talked about, excuse me. We also talked about where they get their material from. And remember, I don't have the PowerPoint up, but if you get stuck, go back to week 3. And remember, we talked about in that diagram, there were different sources. Okay, so who came first? Who was written first in terms of chronology?
Mark.
Mark. Okay, so that means Mark is like the big guy, or I say like the first one on the scene. And who pulled from Mark?
Both,
Matthew and Luke.
both Matthew and Luke.
Both Matthew and Luke. Very good. And so remember the last time when we met, actually, let me see if I can pull it up. When we met, we talked about sometimes they pulled from Q, and Q was like another source. Remember, it's not necessarily like an encyclopedia, but it could have been just this rabbi over here that told them some information, and then they pulled it into their book. So today, let's jump on and talk about Luke. Now remember, oh, let me share the screen so you can see. Now remember, when we talk about the books, okay, Mr. Lee, give me a thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint. Awesome. Now remember when we talk about the different books, all of the books of the New Testament, or really Old Testament, but we're focusing on New Testament, you want to think about the author, who wrote it, and their audience. Who are they writing to? So remember last week we said, if Matthew was writing to a Jewish audience, they were going to use certain words that audience could understand. So now we did Matthew and Mark. We're going to take a look at Luke. We'll take a look at Luke. And if you have your Bible with you, or you have it on your phone or something, we're going to reference a couple of things as well. So let's reference Luke here. Y'all know me, I like to find Afrocentric pictures. I like this picture. This is a picture. It's supposed to be a picture of Luke. But now remember, the book is attributed to Luke. And he could have written it, or he could have helped to help him write the book. Now I want you to see a couple of things, and this comes from your chapter in Luke. When we study the synoptic gospels, remember that's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. When we study them, there are a lot of different ways that we can study the synoptic gospels. And one of the ways that we can study them is by redaction criticism. Redaction criticism. Y'all look right up there in point number 1. Redaction or a redactor is like an editor. I think we said that last week. So the editor goes in and they may have looked at this scripture and they said, well, wait a minute, why'd y'all leave this hanging? And they remember we saw an example and they added on to the story. You may see sometimes in a scripture where something is repeated. You say, well, they said it up here in verse 7, and then you said the same thing again in verse 10. Maybe they didn't erase it. They didn't have erasers. So when we see redactors were editors. Redaction criticism looks at the different gospels and say, well, how did this material change from one book to the other? Another way that we can study the synoptic gospels is the comparative method. And that's what we will be doing as well, to compare the books, and we're going to see how they are alike and how the books are different. We're going to try to do a little bit of that today. So I want y'all to remember the comparative method and redaction criticism. All right, so the book of Luke was written around 85. CE is common area, so error. So written around 85. This author is thought to have also written the book of Acts. So when you read the book of Luke, I want you to think of it like as a part 1 and a part 2. So it's been researched that Luke wrote this gospel and also wrote kind of like a part 2, which was the book of Acts. So it's the same author. So like we said, like with a lot of the books, we're not exactly sure, they didn't leave Google Drive and all this stuff to say exactly who did it, but it's attributed to Luke. And we do know that this writer was a Greek-speaking Christian. Okay, so we know the area, and we know a little bit how it was written, and we know that that person spoke Greek. All right, everybody. So now this is what we're going to do. It's on the screen, and if you have it in your Bibles as well, or if you have your tablet or whatever, or you can just look right here on the screen. Let's take a look at the introduction of Luke. Let's take a look at the introduction of Luke. And I'm also going to pull it up here on my phone, but we're also going to go to Luke chapter 1. So it's on the screen, or if you want to have it in front of you as well, that's fine. So we're going to go to Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1. Now we're gonna do a deep dive here, and we're gonna examine Luke's introduction. And I have a question for you. What is Luke trying to say in this introduction? So I'm gonna read verses 1. The introduction is verses 1 through 4. And if you just keep your Bibles open, because I want you to see what happens after 4, okay? Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. All right, so we're going to pull apart this introduction. What is Luke trying to say here? Let's look at verse number 1, because there's so much, y'all. There's so much when you read the beginning of a book, the beginning of your biblical books are so important because they say a lot. Just like any book, if we would read a novel, the beginning, the chapter 1, or how the person comes out is very important. Okay, so his verse 1 says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. Let's just stop right there. Let's pause right there. We're not going to go to 2 yet. Somebody just tell me, just in verse 1, what's Luke trying to say?
Well, based on what I was reading about the history and watching the video, many letters were written. Everybody had something to say about that time period. So it looks like that's what Luke was taking into account, like Clemens and everybody that wrote something. Because I just thought, until I read this, that the name of the book, they wrote it. But I found out that many people were writing letters, and then they included them in the book of Luke or John or Matthew or John or whatever.
Very good. So this tells us, y'all, and I heard another student, and I'm gonna get to that student, many have undertaken to draw up an account. So that lets us know there are other writings behind Luke. Somebody was gonna say something, and I didn't catch who it was.
Well, I just wanted to add to that, looking at another angle, when he says account of the things that have been fulfilled, we talked, I think last week, about Jesus said that he came to, not to destroy, but to fulfill.
Yeah.
And it looks like many of the things that he came to do have been accomplished from what he's saying here at the outset.
Very good. The fulfillment, y'all remember last week we talked about, good job, Mr. Lee, we talked about the fulfillment statements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I believe that was Matthew.
Matthew, right.
Very good. Anybody else want to jump on it? We're just in verse 1. All right. All right, let's go to 2. Oh, excuse me. In verse 2, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. That's interesting. So what is he telling us here in verse 2? How did they get information?
From eyewitness reports.
Eyewitnesses and servants of the word. That could have been a lot of people.
Yes.
That could have been disciples. That could have been church workers, other followers.
Mm-hmm.
Because the eyewitnesses would have included the multitude to people that were at different things, you know.
Correct. That's it. That's it. That's it. Somebody who was at the wedding in Cana. Y'all, I saw it. I was sitting right there. I was sitting 2 tables over, and we had that wine. You y'all, it was good. You know how people will and then they pass that information down. Very good. Yeah, the eyewitnesses, they were there. Yeah, I was there. I was there. That was my cousin. That was the lady who had the issue of blood. That was my cousin. All right, verse 3. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Okay. How's Luke? What's Luke talking about here in verse 3? He says, yeah, I know some other people got some stuff. And he's not dogging out their books.
But he wrote an orderly account, and this is, something that I knew. Luke was a doctor.
That's
and
right.
so he approached it from almost like a scientific, investigative manner.
That's right. Very good. So he said, look, I've done I know we got other accounts, and he's not dogging out the accounts that came before him. He said, but you know what? I too got a book. And you know how everybody writing a book now. Everybody can go to Amazon and put their books on there. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? And they say, he said, I too have a book. And I've done my research, and I took the time to get it together.
Mm-hmm.
But now here's something I want you to see. Most excellent Theophilus. Who is that? We don't know. Don't know. We're gonna get that on the next slide. Most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. So verse 4 lets us know that Luke comes up with this gospel carefully. He investigated it. He put it together. He recognizes that I know other people have put things together and those were wonderful, but I too, I'm gonna raise my hand and I'm gonna volunteer to put my own spin on it. And he pinpoints Theophilus for a reason. Okay, let's go to Theophilus. Who is Theophilus? Who is Theophilus? Now, remember on the previous slide, no, the one before that, I said that Luke, the author of Luke, wrote this gospel Luke and also Acts. Now, it's interesting, look at the top of the page. The name Theophilus appears in the Bible only 2 places, here in Luke and in Acts. So that tells us that this is that name, and we're going to talk more about what Theophilus could mean, is germane to Luke and nobody else. Scholars are not exactly really sure who Theophilus is. Theophilus could be 2 things. Theophilus could be a person, probably a non-Jewish person or gentleman with whom Luke might have studied with, and maybe he mentored Theophilus. And Luke wants to prove to Theophilus that what he learned is in fact true. Okay. This name Theophilus also means the beloved of God. So Theophilus could be a person, maybe a person that he worked with, or Theophilus could mean maybe the beloved people of God. So a lot of researchers say we're not exactly sure who this Theophilus is, but what we do know is that Luke cared about Theophilus, whether it was a group of people or whether it was one person. Luke wanted this person to know who Jesus was. And so Luke is interesting because he says, I'm going to give you the gospel, but I'm going to give it to you on firsthand knowledge. I'm going to go around and I'm going to interview people or I'm going to talk to my cousins or whoever that had firsthand knowledge of Jesus. Okay. So it's interesting that he came up with his information, not that he didn't pull from other books, but that he also made sure that he got concrete people to add to his book. All right, y'all, I want to show a couple of things to you in the book of Luke. Luke makes a lot of points about Jesus. So we always have to say, who is the author and what are they trying to say about Jesus? So in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and in John, it's almost like a biopic of Jesus. You know, we get to see his ministry on the earth. So I want you to look on the screen, and there are going to be 3 verses. We're going to talk about Pontius Pilate. So it's interesting that we are in this season of Lent and reflection, and we are, you may be reading some of these passages yourself as we prepare for Resurrection Sunday. Okay, so Luke mentions 3 times from Pontius Pilate that Jesus is innocent. 3 times. So it's interesting. Now remember, y'all, Luke said in his paper, or in his book, should I say, I'm sorry, that he was going to eyewitnesses. He was going to the church people. He was going to get this firsthand account of people who knew what they were talking about. So let's go to Luke 23. If you have it open, but I have it also on the screen. In Luke chapter 23, in verse 4, Luke mentions, then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no basis for a charge against this man. That's the first one. In verse 14, he said, you brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges. Number 2. And look at verse 22. For the 3rd time he spoke to them. Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then released. 3 times, 3 mentions that Luke purposely puts in the book that Jesus is innocent. 3 times he makes mention of this from Pontius Pilate. So he was supposed, Jesus was brought to Pontius, supposed to be, put to death under him. Now let's just pause there. We don't see that same story in Matthew and Mark. We don't see, we do have Pontius there, but we don't have those three mentions. What you think? Why do you think Luke put that in there 3 times in one chapter?
Well, he wanted to make it clear that Pontius Pilate had nothing to do with it. It wasn't the Roman government who crucified him. It was because it's always been this discussion about who crucified Christ. Was it the Roman government or was it the Jews? And that's been some friction because why the Jews they had him crucified, but the Jews are saying no, we had no power. The Roman government did it, so everybody did. Nobody wants to take responsibility for it. They wanted it done, but they didn't want their hands attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Luke makes mention. Remember, Luke is like, look, I put together what type of report he said? An orderly report.
Orderly.
Mm-hmm. He said, I investigated. He went down to the courthouse. he went down and got the police report. He got it all and said, this is what I found. Pilate said it 3 times. So he lays out a very clear case that Pilate took his hands off of the truth and calls Jesus innocent. All right, y'all. We are, let me stop my screen because I can't see you all, and then I'm gonna come right back here. Okay. All right. Good day. Good day. All right. So we have some folks who joined us. So let me make sure I have my Stu Hard join us. Marshall, Troy, and Gloria. All right. We are going to. Let me see. I may not be able. Let me see if I can put you in breakout rooms. We are going to divide up a little bit, and I'm going to give you a scripture. Okay, Walter. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Okay, somebody has your microphone open.
The mic's on.
I know some of you may be working and you may not be able to chat as much, and that's all right. So I'm gonna Walter, Lee, Gloria. Walter, Lee, Gloria, and Troy, you are going to be group A. In group A, chat, but group A, I want you to go to Luke 2, 1 through 21. Group A is going to have Luke 2, verses 1 through 21. And I'm going to tell you what you're going to do with it, but just right now, Walter, Lee, Gloria, and Troy, you're going to pull up Luke 2, 1 through 21. Y'all can start reading that. Our next group is going to be Marshall.
Professor Berry, Mr. Duhart is on the line too, but I don't know why he's not showing up.
Uh-oh. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Miss Duhart's gonna get her husband, see. The next group is gonna be Marshall, Carolyn, Sharon, Janice, and we're gonna put Mr. Duhart in there as well. Hopefully he'll be able to show up all right. Group B, we're gonna take Matthew 2, 1 through 12. Matthew 2, chapter 2, 1 through 12. So once again, our groups are going to be A. Okay, I got Janice. A is going to be Walter, Lee, Gloria, and Troy. They're going to take Luke chapter 2. They're reading verses 1 through 21. And then group B is going to be Marshall, Carolyn, Sharon, Janice, Mr. Duhart. They're going to take Matthew chapter 2, 1 through 12. All right, so you're going to take a few minutes and read that. And then I'm going to go back and share our screen. Group A and Group B, you all are going to pay attention to which book has the story of the wise men. Where do we find Jesus? Okay. And then my folks in in Group A and Group B, you're gonna tell me where is Jesus born in Matthew, and our Group A folks are gonna say where Jesus is born in Luke. Okay. Y'all take some time to read that. Let's see if I can put you in I could make a breakout room, but I'm scared if I put you in breakout room, then we got to come back and then I might mess something up. That's me. All right. So Group A has Luke 2. Group B has Matthew 2. What we're doing in this activity is we're doing comparative analysis. And we're going to compare the birth narratives. Okay, so we're going to come back together. Let's come back together in about 2 more minutes. Let's see, about 3 more minutes. Okay, we'll come back together in about 2 more minutes. So pay attention to these sets of questions. Which book has the story of the wise men? Where do they find the baby Jesus? And where is Jesus born in Matt? And where is he born in Luke? All right, scholars, we're going to come back together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Group A. And Group A, folks, you could go ahead and wait a minute. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull up your scripture on the screen. Hold on. Let's see if I can get that here. What you got? Group A, you had Luke 2, right? Luke
Yes.
2, 1 through
Yes.
1. Okay, let me pull this up on the screen. Luke 2. Let's see if I can get this up here. All right, group A, I'm sorry. Group A, look in the chat, y'all know my memory's short. So Group A, folks, you could go ahead and open your microphone.
Mhm.
Something's happening here. Now, we're not going to read the whole 1 through 21, but Group A has already read 1 through 21 for us. And I know our Matt folks have read Matt 2, 1 through 12. So let's make this a little bit bigger because I can't see. All right, so Luke 2, folks. You have your microphones open, so Luke 2, Group A, folks. Tell me, so in this birth narrative, right? In this birth narrative, where is Jesus born?
Born in Bethlehem.
Yes, Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. All right,
Yes.
so Group A said, we find him in Bethlehem. How do they know? So in verse 4, somebody in Group A just read verse 4.
Okay. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David.
Okay, so Joseph, you know, his earthly father. Okay, so they're moving up here, and it tells the exact location that he's moving, and he ends up here in Bethlehem. And we're gonna fast forward and then down to verse 6. Somebody read verse 6. What happened? They were there. Now she couldn't move now. What happened to Mary?
While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn.
All right, all right. So in both groups, we're writing notes there. We find the baby Jesus here in the book of Luke is born in Bethlehem. Now, Group A folks, before we go to Group B, did you find any wise men in your story?
No.
No,
No. Group A people, who came to see the baby Jesus?
the
Shepherds.
shepherds.
The shepherds. And how do we know? What verse points to the shepherds came? Where's your evidence?
15?
15.
No. Let's see. Yeah, 15.
15, very good, very good, very good. I'm sorry, I was up on 8. Very good, thank you. Verse 8, she said, this is our evidence because when the angels had left him and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to where?
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem.
And see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us. And then Group A read down to verse 21. But somebody in Group A, read verse 20.
The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told.
All right. So in Group A, I'm gonna stop here and then I'm gonna go to B. I'll set them up. In Group A, they told us that where was the baby Jesus born?
Bethlehem.
All right. Who came to see the baby?
The shepherds.
Shepherds.
Shepherds. Okay. Group A, y'all can go on mute. Group B, come off of mute. Group B read verses 1 through 12 of chapter 2 in Matt. All right. Y'all ready, Group B?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Where was the baby Jesus born in your gospel?
Bethlehem in Judea.
Yeah, right. Okay, Bethlehem. So we're comparing, and we're gonna come back to Group A in a minute. Okay, so they have the birthplace as Bethlehem. Now it's interesting who's in Group B. It's interesting. Very good. Okay, hold on. Before we get to the wise men, y'all already there. Y'all already there. Okay, so before we get to the wise men, we introduce another character who was not in Luke. So we're starting to talk about King Herod and these magi that come from the east. From the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? So did we hear about them? Did we hear about King Herod and all them in Luke 2, in the Luke 2 story?
No.
No.
No. Very good. All right, Group B people. I'm gonna scoot down. Group B, verses 1 through 12. All right. In Group B, tell me what's going on with Herod and the Magi.
Well, Herod wanted to speak to the Magi in secret to ask him if he would find out where Jesus is so that he could worship him. That's what he said.
That's what he's saying, right?
Right. That's exactly what he said. He wanted it to be reported back to him, but that was not his intention, to worship him.
So he said, look at verse 8. He sent them to location Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship. But we know that he was a trip. And so Group B, Group B, tell me what happened when they get there. Verse 9, 10.
In verse 11, it states, on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So they found Mary with the child.
Right.
And it doesn't say he was in a manger. It didn't say he was anywhere other than they saw Mary with the child.
That's it. That's it. Okay. So Matthew group. Look at verse 11. Miss Carolyn read it earlier. On coming to the what?
House.
On coming to the house.
Mm-hmm.
But Luke group, where was the baby Jesus?
Stable.
In the manger, right? Yeah. Right, the stable, yeah, because there was no room for them in the inn, right? So we're doing comparative analysis between the narrative, the birth narratives of Jesus in Matthew and Luke. This is what we're doing, right? We're scholars. So I want you to see that even though the premise of the story is the same, the baby Jesus was born. Mm-hmm. That's the same. He had a mama named Mary and a daddy named Joseph. That's the same. It wasn't in a hospital or a place that they wanted to be. That's pretty much same. But and location is the same, Bethlehem. But now we have some different situations going on around the baby Jesus. Not to say that these people didn't come. Maybe the wise men came when Jesus was 3 days old, because they had to keep walking. You know, we don't know. Maybe the shepherds were able to make it over there when he was 12 hours old. You know, we don't really have a time stamp on these stories. It's not to say that either one of the stories are wrong, but what I want you to see is, because the synoptic gospels, right, are seeing things with their own eyes. So I saw something, Troy saw something, Carolyn saw something, Sharon saw something, and we all wrote down what we saw or heard or investigated. So it's interesting here. Have y'all ever seen that before? It's interesting here that as we do this research, and we come back to our PowerPoint, as we do this research, it's not to say that any of the writers are wrong, but they were privy to different sources. They were privy to different people. Luke said, I witnessed people. I had people who were there. You know, he said, I talked to them firsthand. So, okay, so let me go back. What book had the wise men?
Matthew.
Matthew. What book had the shepherds?
Luke.
All right. Now, I know this is what March, but y'all remember back in December, maybe if your churches were actively getting together, but if not, we did it in years past. You had the Christmas play. And in the Christmas play, I know we did it at our church. We had wise men, and the kids were shepherds, and we had the little baby Jesus doll, and we had a Mary and a Joseph, and we had some animals. You know how we do the Christmas play, right? So now I want you to think, oh, wow, we had shepherds in the play. God, my son played a shepherd one time. We had shepherds in the play, and we had wise men in the play. And even though they were characters in that play, they were real people that saw the baby Jesus, but they may not have been a part of the same book. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Professor Berry.
Yes.
In Luke, they refer to, in the verse story, they refer to him as the baby And then we go to Matthew, they refer to him as the child. So
Oh, interesting. Okay, and the
it
baby.
indicates he is older, and that's why I'm picking up. They always refer to him as a baby. He was in the manger wrapped, but by the time they get to the house, he is a child. So he could be, 12 months, a toddler, whatever. Because, it took some while to get where you're going, but then.
For the child, yeah, I see that there. Yeah, Jesus could have been older, or it could have simply just been the way the author wrote it. But yeah, you're right. And because listen, y'all, we don't have a timestamp on when they got there.
Right.
We don't know how, y'all know how long it take to get places driving. But how long did it take for them to get there walking? Did their horse get tired? Did the camel just quit? Because it was a difficult travel. Did it start? Did the weather get bad for them?
Yeah.
We don't know.
And Professor Barry, along those same lines, there could have been somebody in the inn or in the hotel that checked out, and there was a space available for them.
Right. We don't know. We don't know. But the good thing we know is that Jesus shows up.
Right.
Jesus is born. All right, guys, we're going into the home stretch here. I want you to look at this comparative analysis. So you see three colors here. You see the white, the pink, and the blue. In Mark's gospel, Mark shows Jesus as this authoritative leader. And we said last week, Matthew showed Jesus because he was writing to this Jewish audience. Matthew shows Jesus as a Moses. He's fulfilling the law. And also in Luke, we see that Jesus's ministry also starts as he gets older now. His ministry starts off with a sermon in the synagogue that makes these people mad, makes these leaders just downright mad. So we see in all three of the books, we see Jesus portrayed different ways. Okay. All right, this is good. All right, y'all, we're gonna go to our last part. Jesus as the prophet. So in the book of Luke, Luke understands and he wants the audience to know that Jesus is a prophet. He's been sent by God to the people, and the prophet is the spokesperson. The prophet is going to say, this is what God said. This is what you got to do. As prophet, when Luke writes this stuff down, he's showing that he heals people and he's going to tell you what's going to happen in the future. And so in the book of Luke, he shows that he lives as a prophet. He speaks forth things and they happen. He died as a prophet. Okay. Here's the last thing I want y'all to see, and I know we're pressed for time. Okay, in Mark's gospel, look over to the left at the bottom of the screen. In Mark's gospel, we're going to be doing this probably in the next, 2 weeks as we talk about Good Friday at our churches. Good Friday, you may have the 7 last words and things like that. But in Mark's gospel, somebody mute your microphone. Jesus is silent throughout the crucifixion until the end. But in Luke's gospel, Jesus talks more and he's concerned about others. All right, y'all, let's go to Luke 23. Luke 23. Luke 23. I'm gonna pull it up. Luke 23. Let's see if I can stop. Okay, we're going to go to Luke 23, verse 28. Luke 23, verse 28. Sorry, I was trying to bring the scripture up on here. Luke 23. There we go. All right, now I can bring it back up. So remember, we're doing comparison criticism today. We'll bring it up on the screen. Comparison criticism says what's happening here, and what's happening there, and then they compare what's different. Okay, so I'm going to go to 23. Luke 23 and 28. If somebody's there, go ahead and read 23 verse 28.
But Jesus turned to them and said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children.
Keep going again to verse 29.
For the days are surely coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed.
Okay, so I just want you to see some things here. As if you get time, if you go back to, I'll hit stop here, the Gospel of Mark. Jesus doesn't talk as much, it's pretty silent. Okay, but in Luke, he talks more. Isn't that interesting? So remember, Luke said, I'm going to talk to the eyewitnesses. Remember, Luke said, I'm going to do my own orderly investigation. I'm going to put it together for you so that you know that the things that you learned are true. And remember, in this comparative criticism that we did earlier in the exercise with Matthew and Luke, it's not to say that any one of the writers were wrong. Remember, we had the shepherds in one story and we had the wise men in another. We don't know when they got there. They probably weren't there on the same night or day. It may have taken them time to get there to the location. But isn't this interesting that in both Matt and Luke, the birth narratives had him born in the same place. Now, what if one of them said he was born in Bethlehem and the other one said that he was born in Greece? Oh, we got a problem. Right? Can we have a problem? So and one of them said his mama was Mary and the other one said his mama was Miriam. Oh, we got a problem. So when we have those key things that line up, right? Because remember, they were looking at each other before these books came into our formal canon as we see it today. And they did their own research. Aren't we thankful for that? All the way here in 2022. All right, so I hope that open your eyes a little bit as we go into maybe your churches in the next couple of weeks are going to be doing the 7 last words and things like that, or maybe you are preparing yourself in different gospels. Jesus is going to be portrayed different ways during the crucifixion. Why? Because the author has a particular audience and he has a point to prove with that audience. It's not that any of them are wrong, but they're like, look, I'm gonna come this way. Okay. And it's interesting, I'm gonna let y'all go. I know it's 12:05. It's interesting, Gloria said, well, Luke was a physician and Luke was very orderly. Okay. Some people on here may like to write poetry or something, and they might write their way a different way. We may have, anybody been in law enforcement or military?
Yes.
Folks in here? Okay. Well, all right. Oh, look at all y'all. I feel safe. Now, y'all going to write it a different way. You're going to tell who did what, detail.
Yeah.
You're not going to have an extra, all this extra chatting. Now, I'm going to give you dialogue. I'm going to tell you what she had on. I'm going to tell you how her hair was, all of that, because that's how I write.
Yes.
Right? But if I saw Lee and Marshall and Troy and Mr. Duhart, because you have a different background and you're gonna get straight into the point. You're gonna say, this is who was at the cross, this is who was there, this is what they did, they were arrested, and you're gonna write up the report or whatever it was. Okay.
Yes.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? Okay, y'all know I talk forever. So this week you have your same thing, you have your discussion. And this allows me some time, so I'll go back and I will be grading the week 2 and 3. Okay, so we're on week 4 this time. All right, any questions, comments? All right.
Good class.
All right, God bless you. Yes. Awesome class. Thank you, Troy. Good to see you all. Okay, take care. Have a good afternoon.
You're welcome. All right.
You too.